Hi and welcome to a cEDH gameplay video Tale of the Tape, a match that I have recorded, narrated and edited together for you. This match took place March the 3rd, with more coming up in the future, as the Phanteon series will continue. And if you're interested in taking part in joining some of the events, then link in the description below to this web page. Now the contenders for today is Sir the Enchanter, going for that necropotence but a very big enchantment package as well in general. As well as a few mid-range cards as the creature selection as well, but also he's playing the Heliod Sun Crowned together with Walking Ballista, which is something that Sir can actually tutor for. Second in turn order is Ball from Split Second, another YouTube channel that is uploading cEDH content gameplay videos. He's playing Bruse and Thrasios Sands Black, with Surda, Kinan Emil, the Dockside, the Splitter Kitten, Teferi, Hullbreaker Horror, Seedborn Muse, Consecrated Sphinx, The Wandering, no Underworld Breach. That's interesting. But then a Basalt Monolith together with his Kinan, but also of course Grim Monolith, Basalt Monolith together with Surda as well. Third in turn order is Art with Tymna Kraum. He's added Delny to the package together with Tymna, Dockside, Lowfolk, Orcish Bowmaster, Ragavan, and Delny Esper Sentinel will also trigger together with also Fairy Mastermind and Delny as well. He's playing Underworld Breach, Angel's Grace together with Underworld Breach, kinda rare to see that, but that's what he's also including. Then Lion's Eye Diamond, Underworld Breach, and of course Brain Freeze. Last in turn order is Tivit by Beta. Displacer Kitten together with Tivit is great, Hullbreaker Horror, Ursa Lord High Artificer, makes sense, you're generating a lot of artifacts, tokens that Tivit could utilize, or well that our Ursa could also utilize. Lofo, Orcish Bowmaster, he is not playing Ad Nauseam, but obviously playing the Time Sieve. So a form of a mid-range Tivit build in general. And with that, we are ready to start the match. We have a pre-game effect of a Gemstone Caverns from the Beta, the Tivit player, the last player in the turn order. Then Sur with the one-piece playmat starts off with an Arid Misa and passes the turn. Ball plays a Tropical Island, then a Mana Crypt. Land from Art, the blue-black version. Then turn goes to Beta, the Tivit player. Land drop, sacrifice it, playing a bunch of rocks, and ending it with an Imperial Seal. Finding a Tundra with the fetch land that he used previously. We have a miscast from Ball, but a response with a miscast again. Protecting, no spell pierce, protecting it. Making sure that the Imperial Seal resolves. With this high amount of mana that he has, he could potentially cast Tivit next turn and then follow up with basically just casting Time Sieve from the two treasures, sacrificing 3 clues and those 2 artifacts to basically go infinite turns next turn. So Tivit might be setting up for a victory here. Sur is cracking the Arid Misa in the end step. Finding a Tundra. On Sur's turn 2, he is playing an Underground Sea as land drop. Passing, Ball takes 3 damage from the Mana Crypt. And draws a card. Plays an Forbidden Orchard. This is the land that can give tokens to other players. Then he's playing an Esper Sentinel. Using the Forbidden Orchard. They are really thinking about who to get this token. But in the end, Art gets at 1/1 colorless Spirit. Kinda risky to give the token to that person, because Tymna is a thing. Blood Crypt. Taking 2 to shock it into play. He cracks a Jeweled Lotus, gives a card draw to Esper Sentinel and plays Kraum and smashes with Kraum at the Sur player. Turn goes to Beta, who plays a Scrubland and a Rhystic Study. But in response we have an Orcish Bowmaster trying to kill the Esper Sentinel on the ETB. But then a Swan Song on the Rhystic Study. Counterspelling it, giving him a swan. Sorry, my bad. The Esper Sentinel actually got to live. It was the token that was killed by the Orcish Bowmaster. As you can see, Art no longer has a colorless token. Turn goes to Sur, who plays a land drop. We have currently counterspelled the Rhystic Study, we have killed the token, Orcish Bowmaster is in play, and Esper Sentinel gets to live for now. We are playing a Rhystic Study from the Sur player, giving a card draw to the Esper Sentinel, triggering Orcish Bowmaster. We are dealing damage to players. We're actually keeping the Esper Sentinel alive with the Orcish Bowmaster. I'm guessing that he wants it to generate Orc triggers. Well, we'll see how that pays out. Land drop from Ball, Plateau. He attacks with the Esper Sentinel that have survived for a little bit too long, punching Art for 1. And then casting Thrasios, the Triton hero, giving an Spirit to Beta. You can see his white paper there representing the colorless spirit. He pays for the Rhystic Study and then passes the turn. Scrubland, land drop. And he casts Tymna, giving a card draw to the Rhystic Study Sur player, the True Bofa. He then goes to combat with his Kraum, smashing the True Bofa, the Sur player, for 4 damage in the air. He pays 1 life and draws a card, triggering Orcish Bowmaster. This time now, finally killing the Esper Sentinel, sending it to the graveyard. Turn goes to Tivit, who untaps and draws a card. And it is time to finally cast the Commander. Tivit, Seller of Secrets. Don't pay for Rhystic Study, and the Sur player draws a card. It is time to vote. He's making 2 treasures, and then some clues. And then he passes the turn to Sur, who begins his turn 4. Playing a land. He plays a very strange card, I actually don't know what it is. We'll try to figure out. I'm guessing that it's a Phyrexian Metamorph. It was a Phyrexian Metamorph, making a token out of Tivit, creating clues and treasures. Ball rolls for Crypt, no damage, and then draws a card for turn. Ball plays a Flooded Strand. He sacrifices the Flooded Strand. Ball finds Breeding Pool and passes the turn. Art draws a card for turn. Kraum is attacking at Ball for 4 in the air. This is his only actual attacker, considering there are 2 Tivits in play that are 5/5 flyings. Then he loses 1 life and draws a card with Tymna. Bowmaster triggers, and he pings Tymna for 1 damage. Art plays a land drop, Training Center that taps for blue and black, and then he casts a Phantasmal Image. There is a concept inside cEDH where you say too big to fail. You see, Tivit is a very big and powerful creature for 6 mana, but sometimes you cast Tivit for only 2 mana. This is now the 3rd Tivit. Art votes for 2 treasures, and then he gets 3 other clues. So 2 treasures and 2 clues. And then he passes the turn to the real Tivit, Tivit draws a card for turn. Tivit is attacking at Ball. This is the only player who doesn't have blockers in the air. In response, before blockers, he's Chord of Calling, using Thrasios to convoke. One thing he could do is find a Gildrake and kill 2 birds in 1 stone. The problem is the ward, so if he finds Gildrake, he can't pay the 3 mana for ward against Tivit. But he could find a Phantasmal Image and make his own Tivit and then block and trade. X equals 2 on the chord, and then he pays for the Rhystic Study with the Plateau. He finds a Dockside Extortionist. And a small potential misplay here, he's not really going to prevent Tivit from smacking his face anymore, but he's still accidentally doing this before blockers. This means that if he would have done it post-combat or later, he would have gained the treasures from the potential clues that Tivit could have generated here. But Dockside still will generate a lot of treasures from all of these clues that Tivits have generated. Art is cracking both of his 2 treasures, making 2 blue mana, and then use one of those to crack a clue to draw a card. Because of card draw from a clue, there's an Orcish Bowmaster trigger. Now, Bowmaster is going to target the Fimage. Now he can't pay for the ward, but because Fimage has a trigger that if it is targeted, it will sacrifice itself. And you can target something that has ward. He just can't pay for it, but it doesn't need to. It will basically be sacrificed. Then Sur is sacrificing his 2 treasures to also crack a clue. Now, even though they sacrifice a few treasures and clues, he's still generating a total of 13 treasures. As you can see, his 6, 6 and a 1 on the dice placed over on the treasure tokens. Then Tivit connects and we put the Tivit trigger on the stack, but in response, Sur is casting Archivist of Ogma. Tivit is voting for 2 clues. Because Tivit has so few cards in his hand, they're all giving him treasures. Kind of the reason why this Tivit actually wanted clues. Post combat, in second main phase. He's casting a Hullbreaker Horror for 7 mana and then pay 1 more for Rhystic Study. But in response we are activating Thrasios from Ball by cracking a few treasures. He is revealing a delay. Now this doesn't actually work because Hullbreaker Horror can't be countered, but it could be good considering what else is potentially coming up next. Now Bowmaster triggers. Now they are scared of a potential Dockside copy. For example, Beta could have a Phyrexian Metamorph in his hand and that would be horrible GG, so they're putting 1 damage to the Dockside to potentially prevent that. In response to this, we are activating Thrasios again. Scrying, putting that on the bottom and revealing a Fellower Stone. Not that good currently. And then the second Bowmaster trigger sends it on Dockside. And he responds again by sacrificing 4 treasures and sinks it into Thrasios. Scry, sending it to the bottom and revealing a Tundra that comes into play tapped. And Dockside is killed by Orcish Bowmaster. We are now back to the Hullbreaker Horror on the stack. Hullbreaker Horror now resolves, and he begins by casting a Chromox. He currently have a setup to generate infinite mana with his Hullbreaker Horror with Chromox and Mana Vault. Sadly though, he doesn't really have colored mana fixing yet. He can only generate infinite colorless mana. But on the Hullbreaker trigger by casting Chromox, he's targeting Mana Vault. And he passes on Rhystic Study and Kraum. Orcish Bowmaster triggers and deals 1 damage to Beta's face. Mana Vault goes to his hand. Now a problem trying to combo off with this is that there is a Rhystic Study in play, which means that he's going to give away some card draw to people once he is sitting here and trying to generate this infinite colorless mana. He then casts Mana Vault and trigger the Rhystic Study. Now there is some table talk going on from Ball, trying to explain that the problem for Tivit, as Tivit could continue this loop with bouncing Mana Vault and such, but in response we could use the delay that Ball have revealed, which is going to just sluggish this down. And if we do, delay will disappear and we pass to Sur, who has just drawn a bunch of cards with his Rhystic Study. Not good for anyone on this table. However, Beta doesn't plan to stop the loop, but he's also planning to pay for Rhystic Study. Going for this loop, Beta can't currently pay for the Rhystic Study, but his plan is to crack the 2 clues, basically giving the true Bofa a few card draws with his Rhystic Study, then crack the 2 clues and hope that he finds something that will make him go infinite while paying for Rhystic Study at the same time. This makes Ball kinda forced to use his delay with his Mana Vault, still considering the situation, asking the true Bofa, the Sur player, what he is going to do on his turn, and the Sur player basically responds with "I'm far off." So in the end, delay on the Mana Vault. And the Sur player gets a Spirit. In response to the delay, Tivit is cracking a clue. In the end, Mana Vault is delayed and the Chromox is being sent back to his hand. He then recasts the Chromox, imprinting nothing, but returns the Sol Ring. And now he's starting a loop with Chromox and Sol Ring. But while doing this loop, he is going to feed Rhystic Study. Now he's going to sit here doing this manually for a while, casting Chromox, casting Sol Ring, generating 1 colorless mana, but giving Sur player 2 cards. So for every 1 colorless mana, we're giving Sur player 2 cards. Now the correct play from Sur here is to basically do nothing, because he's more or less drawing his entire library here. And somewhere down the line, once he's come up to like a few treasure counts, he could start to interact with this somewhere down the line. Now he is cracking a clue once he has generated a few mana, drawing a card and taking a damage from the Orcish Bowmaster. So even though if he theoretically gained infinite colorless and were able to draw an enormous amount of cards, there's also an Orcish Bowmaster in play that will ping him while he's trying to do this. So even though Tivit in theory has the win attempt, it's tricky and very hard. Rhystic Study and Orcish Bowmaster doing some very good job. He is now casting Mox Diamond, and this time instead of bouncing something of his own, he is going to bounce the Rhystic Study. Mox Diamond goes to the graveyard because he can't discard a land, and Rhystic Study goes back to his hand. And then we're back to the original loop again, casting Chromox, bouncing Sol Ring, and then recasting Sol Ring, tapping Sol Ring for 2 mana, and then returning Chromox. Now the mana cost of Chromox is 0, mana cost of Sol Ring is 1, this entire loop generates 1 mana, and now there's no Rhystic Study, so he can generate infinite colorless. Everyone pass, and the Tivit player now have infinite colorless mana, but no colored. Here he is casting Azorius Signet. He currently has infinite colorless, bouncing Sol Ring back to his hand. This could generate infinite blue-white mana. In response, the Sur is casting Demonic Consultation, naming Force of Will, flipping the first 6, then continuing, flipping, and there's the Force. Losing a few cards, but nothing key important. Adnos was lost, but he's no longer on that key life where he can use Adnos anymore. And then he's going to Force of Will the Azorius Signet. And from here, we are now passing the turn to Sur, who untaps and draws a card. He plays a Jewel Lotus. He plays a land that taps for black and white. He goes to combat and attacks with Tivit at Art and Vote. He will have 2 treasures, and then he gets 3 clues. So 2 treasures and 3 clues. He casts a Talion and Kraum triggers and draws a card. Orcish Bowmaster triggers. 1 damage at Beta's face, the Tivit player. He chooses the value number 1 because there's a Sol Ring currently in Beta's hand that he could cast, and if he's trying to do the same loop again, Beta will basically die. And then he plays Blind Obedience. This is a great card versus Tivit. Or maybe I should say Tivits. And then Sur actually has to go to the end step, discarding a bunch of cards. Apparently, even though he drew a lot of cards with his Rhystic Study, he didn't draw into the win. Ball untaps and takes no damage from the Mana Crypt and draws a card for turn. That's exactly how you should be looking at your hand while you're playing on webcam. Professional. Making sure no one is sneak peeking on it while you still get to see it. He casts a Teferi Time Reveler. The Silence Azorius Planeswalker. Everyone pass and Teferi resolves with 4 loyalty counters. Ball now has Silence or a Grand Abolisher in effect, more or less. He is bouncing the Bowmaster to draw a card. He's kind of forced to do this because let's say he bounces Blind Obedience and draws a card. Orcish Bowmaster will trigger and just kill Teferi in that case. So he's bouncing the Orcish Bowmaster. Currently, the true Bofa can't recast the Bowmaster because of Teferi. He's giving a Spirit to Art and casts Displacer Kitten. Kraum draws a card. Now if he has a, let's say Mox Opal in his hand, he could theoretically go for a victory here. There is a problem though, Blind Obedience. He can't currently win with the Mox Opal or Mox Amber together with these 2 cards here. He then casts Chromox. It's going to trigger the Displacer Kitten to bounce Teferi. However, there is still a way to play around the Blind Obedience. He can still flicker the Teferi, and even though he can't really tap the tapped rock for mana, he can still return it back to his hand. And Teferi still draws a card. So he doesn't generate any mana whatsoever, but he's still drawing a card. Basically drawing out his entire deck, and then potentially figuring out something. So he minus Teferi to return Chromax back to his hand and drawing a card. This is now shortcuttable, and he can basically just draw as many cards as he wants. He plays a Mana Confluence as a land drop for turn. So all that he really needs is just to find any spell that he can cast to bounce Blind Obedience, and then he can start generating infinite mana. And Teferi basically giving him protection going through this combo. And once he's bounced Blind Obedience, eventually going through the motion explaining the steps for everyone, he will start generating a lot of mana with Basalt Monolith that he has in his hand and Kinnan that he has in his hand as well to generate infinite card draw with Thrasios. And with infinite card draw he can find Final of Devastation, put all his creatures into play and smash all of his opponents with normal clean combat damage. So Ball from Split Seconds with his bruse Thrasios wins the match with a Teferi Displacer Kitten combo through both an Orc Bowmaster and a Blind Obedience.